Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Saturday morning. I'm the moderator. I'm Joanna. I'm a local art critic and stage practitioner. And I'm very glad to be invited to moderate this section. And I know some of you have met Veerle. Am I pronouncing it right? Veerle. I won't even try the last name, just the first name. Some of you have met her last evening, but I know also some of you are joining this session for the first time. So as a very brief introduction, Veerle is the representative from the Center for Music and Performing Arts Heritage in Belgium. In the Flanders region of Belgium is where Dutch is spoken, isn't it? Flemish, no, not Dutch, Flemish. And today she's going to share with us one of the very important projects the center has been conducting over the past few years. And as you can see from the title, it's called Archiving as a Shared Mission. So Veerle is going to share with us how she has worked with the theater practitioners in Belgium, and so that everybody can contribute to the very important mission of archiving the performing arts in Belgium. So over to you. Veerle will conduct a presentation for about 45 minutes, and then afterwards we'll have a Q&A session.
So yes, good morning again to so yesterday. So thank you very much for joining us today for the second presentation. Yesterday, for those who were here, we went through some key concepts on performing arts heritage. I use PAH to make it a bit shorter on my PowerPoint presentation. We also went into the importance of a sustainable approach of the heritage of performing arts. I presented some models how policy could support and facilitate this, the care for performing arts heritage. And we also took a look to the international context with the international network SIGMAS I presented yesterday. And today I would like to go deeper into how we put all these strategies into practice. And I would like to give you some examples on how we develop and offer our supporting services to others who have performing arts heritage or who create performing arts heritage. And just to give you an overview of my presentation, first of all, I would like to give you some insights where we started from in developing our services. These were things we thought of at the beginning, but also during our work, we gained some more insights on how to develop supporting services. Yesterday, I also gave you an overview of our strategic goals for the upcoming 5 years. So we had to develop strategic goals in order to receive funding from the government, and these are the themes on which we will work the upcoming 5 years, and for which we develop supporting services. And of course, we will also conclude. So as I said, we started from some insights. And so CEMPER, the name of my organization, the Center for Music and Performing Arts Heritage in Flanders. It's the northern Dutch-speaking part of Belgium. And we support everyone who has a question on the care or safeguarding of performing arts, can call us, can email us, can contact us in any kind of way. So we try to help everyone who has a question or a need on performing art, so individual cases. But we also take proactively, we also take structural initiatives to the benefit of more than one party. And for these kinds of initiatives, we always start from the needs. I also emphasized this yesterday. We want to develop solutions based on the real needs those our target groups encounter. Otherwise, we think that this is really the core to develop services, that you first see where the problems are and what the needs are. So it's a bit of a bottom-up approach. And as we also encountered that our target groups, they don't have the knowledge on how to archive, they don't know how to do it, they have little means in general. So the services we want to develop need to be very accessible and of course for free. Not only because they don't have the means, but also because they need to be convinced of the importance of archiving. So if you ask money in order to get these services, they won't be motivated at all, because they first need to, first need to convince them that it's important. And we also develop concepts in group, because we are convinced that if you share things in a group setting, it works better than face-to-face, one-to-one, I mean. And therefore we always try to develop services where we build up the capacities of our target groups in order for them to do it themselves on the long term, independently from us. And what we also noticed that if we wanted to start developing something based on a real need that we encountered in our target groups, that actually there was already an immense amount of expertise also internationally. But sometimes people who were working on these teams didn't know it from each other, because they lived too far from each other, or because they worked in different domains, an academic and an artist practitioner. And there was a willingness to share expertise, but not the time to do so. So there is an organization, an actor that needs to connect all these people and all this existing expertise. So that's how we first start always, to see what is already existing and who is working on it. Because it's not, you don't need to start always all over again. It's not, if someone already has investigated a sort of problem and found a solution, you can better also see if this solution works in your own context. Because of course every context is different, every legal context is different in every country, so you need to investigate if it's applicable in your context, and of course you can adapt these things according to your own context or needs. And of course, if we don't find any expertise on a certain problem we encounter, of course we start developing things on our own. And of course, there's also a need for an actor that implements it in the performing arts field and make it deployable for different target groups. We also saw that some needs that need to be solved were not possible for individual actors to solve themselves on their own. We come back on that later, it will become clearer. And also we encountered that different fields had common needs. So you needed a sort of coordinated actor to develop strategies that were wider than helping one individual actor. And you also need an actor that implements these instruments that the different target groups can use it. It all sounds a bit abstract now, but you will see later on that it will become clearer. And what helped us out also is that since we don't have a proper collection of our own, we don't own an archive, we don't have a collection of our own, so we're not bounded in any way. That's why we really have a neutral position in helping others. And that's why we can be a very good mediator, intermediate and moderating between different parties. What we also encounter is that we almost always collaborate with different partners, not only because it's a need to share means and staff, but also because it's very interesting to share knowledge and expertise. And of course, if you collaborate with different partners, you also have a broader reach of your services, because every partner has his own target groups or has other contacts than you have. So for us it works, although I must say it's also very time consuming sometimes to work, to collaborate with different partners, but in the end it gives a better result mostly. And another starting point, as I said yesterday, we try to show the potential of the heritage of performing arts, the possibilities to reuse in different forms and contexts. So we started to assemble a lot of good practices on how to reuse the performing arts heritage. We listed it up on our website within different categories, international examples, and we noticed that if you can show what the potential is, that the companies are sometimes more motivated to go back in the process, as I said yesterday, to start archiving, which is sometimes more boring for some people in the arts field. But if they see what they can do with it, they are motivated to start with the first steps to come to that point in reusing their archives and collections. And what we also encountered, that it's very important to have a good communication strategy on the services you want to offer. Because if you, we are a heritage organization, and if we only use heritage terminology towards the arts field, no one understands what we mean. Because there are things like tangible heritage, intangible heritage. I don't know how it is in the Hong Kong arts scene, but in the beginning, the performing arts field in my country didn't have a clue what we meant by cultural heritage and intangible heritage and the sustainable approach and things like that. So we actually needed to translate the heritage terminology in a language that other fields could understand. And therefore, ambassadors are very important also. If you have people in the arts field telling other arts companies that that it is important to archive, and that there is an organization that you can contact if you have questions, it always works better than that we ourselves say that we offer interesting services. And we noticed that if some big institutions that are renowned in the arts field, if we let them present things on events for the performing arts field, that afterwards we always have more questions coming in, for example. So let me go deeper in the different services we developed up until now. As I said yesterday, if you want to have a good strategy on how to deal with performing arts, the first thing we had to do is have an overview on all the archives and collections of performing arts, and also on the actors who are involved in this heritage, or were involved, because of course these are mostly things from the past, and the involved artists and art organizations sometimes don't even exist anymore. But you need to have this overview to know what exists on material, on intangible heritage, and on communities and actors working on it to create a good foundation for your further strategies. And especially for my country, since there is no central institution like a theater museum or a dance archive that has a sort of coordinated acquisition policy on performing arts, it is scattered all over within the performing arts field, in the existing still active companies, but also in the heritage field, in our museums and our archival institutions. Although there's no central institution, there are in their collections some minor parts related to performing arts. So there also we need to have that overview, because how can you encourage and inspire to reuse this performing arts heritage if you don't know where it is? So actually there's a big need still in tracing and describing all these archives and collections. And we try to support this in different ways. The first instrument we use is not something we developed of our own, but it's a portal of private archives from all kinds of fields. And if you type performing arts, podiumkunsten, sorry, here, this is the search box. Podiumkunsten means performing arts. Then you get this list of all these private archives that were ever registered in this portal. And if you open one of these links, then you come on a page describing the archive. We use the standard ISADG standards. It's a heritage standard, so don't worry if you have never heard of it, but it's important in the heritage field to use these kind of standards, that everyone describes it in the same way, and that we can share all these informations in different databases worldwide. So we try to develop, we support also, sometimes we do it ourselves if we go on site and we find an important archive, then we make an inventory ourselves and we describe it in this portal. But we also support our target groups to do it themselves, to enter this information in order for researchers or other interested people to find their archive. What we also did in the past and what we want to continue in the future is using the platforms, the Wikimedia platforms. As you know, I don't know how you search on the internet, but I always tend to look in Google or other search engines, and if you want to know something on a company or an artist, I type it in Google, and almost always you come, the first link you get is a link to Wikipedia. And we noticed that as for the artists and companies in our region, that actually the information on Wikipedia is sometimes incorrect or not complete. Or there aren't any pictures or other links to video material. So we thought it was important to make sure the information is up to date, to add information, to correct information. And therefore we organized editathons, which is the word for writing sessions, where you write together in order to create more articles on Wikipedia. And I was glad in the Asia Art Archive, they also organized editathons. And so it's a technique that also is used here, of course, in a lot of fields. And it works very well, although I must say it's not that easy to add and create content on Wikipedia. You really need to have, you really need to get used on the way, or maybe it is my, I'm not so handy in all those things, but once you know how it works, it really can help to make make it, to find all these artists and companies in a better way, to make it more findable and visible. So we add data from artists, companies, and theater venues to Wikidata, and we also add images to Wikimedia Commons, also a platform. Besides that, we organize workshops to describe and to photograph objects of theater and dance collections. And here you see a painted set used ages ago in theater performance, and actually it's when it's lying down, it's a huge roll. It's rolled up. And so it takes a bit of an effort to photograph these objects, because you need you see all the materials used, and we educate volunteers to do so. So we organize a workshop for volunteers, and they describe it, they make the photos, and they describe all the information in an Excel file in order for us to add it to other platforms. And we also did it for costumes of different theater companies. You also see a Bolivian dancer. It was a special project of a Bolivian folk dance group in Brussels, located in Brussels, and we also made photos of all their costume collections to publish on a website. But we also do it for puppetry collections, as you see, and other painted set pieces. And these are our volunteers. And I must say that these are old pensioned ladies that still are full of energy and helping us out for different these kinds of things. So it's very fun to work with them. We also have several platforms under construction. As I said, the heritage of performing arts is scattered around, so it's very difficult to know where it can be found. And therefore we are working on a sort of online guide or finding aid to search for these archives and collections, because sometimes there are different databases where you can search for it, but of course there are also museums and archives that keep it physically, all these collections. So it's a sort of roadmap to find it more easy, with exemplary research questions and roadmaps on how to search for sources. So it's a bit of a website above all the existing databases and physical finding places, in order to help people to find these archives and collections far more easy. And another platform under construction is one of our partners. They are preparing a public metadata catalog for audiovisual heritage of all kinds of fields, including performing arts. And I come back on that later on, but we coordinated a large-scale digitization project of audiovisual material of the performing arts field. And now it has been digitized and it has been stored digitally, but it cannot be found yet. So we hope this catalog will help others finding this material, because of course there are a lot of limits on copyright issues, but of course the metadata can be published. And now it's a big challenge for the arts organizations from whom we digitized all this material to add the metadata, because it's a huge work. But if there's no metadata, it cannot be found. So it's very important. Also, for intangible heritage, there is a platform created by one of our partners for all kinds of intangible heritage. also music and performing arts. And we help, you can register as a community, you can register your tradition, your skills, your practices onto this platform. And yeah, it's important to make this intangible heritage visible and also findable. And we support our target groups in order to do so. And here you can see some photos on what has been registered already on music and performing arts heritage. So we went through some supporting tools on the tracing and describing of performing arts and make it findable. The second strategic goal is we want to work on is the documenting of performing arts. And in 2015, we organized a conference in Brussels with the title Documenting Performing Arts, How to Capture Creation and Performance. And there's a detailed report in English available, so in case you are interested, please don't hesitate to ask me for the link. And we actually wanted performing artists as well as heritage workers and academics to reflect on the questions you see here. Do the archives assembled by performers and companies contain the information they want? Is there a need to create additional documentation before, during, or after the artistic creation? And how might this promote the transmission and the study of ephemeral artistic practices? And above all, how can this remain feasible for performers and companies? Important questions for me. And some of the participants of that conference expressed the need for a framework on documenting performing arts, a sort of guideline with concrete and practical guidelines on how to document artistic processes. Others, however, thought it would be impossible to give generic instructions because artistic practices and working contexts are too diverse. So it was a bit of a complex situation, so we asked for, to the performing arts field, what do you need? And actually we had two different perspectives. So, as we always do in Belgium, we went for the consensus, which is a bit of a mixture of both perspectives. So we did create a framework, but it is a kind of a mixed approach. It's a website called udoc.be. Unfortunately, only available in Dutch at this moment, sorry. But you will be able to find things since some of the information is also in English. And it's a platform under construction, and on the one hand, it offers a generic but a rather abstract framework. On the other hand, it offers a tagged and diverse list of tools and inspiring case studies. And as you can see here, there is on the home page you have this search box with what, why, and how to document. Three important questions you need to ask yourself before you start documenting. And underneath there are drop-down boxes, and you can make combinations of these three. And for example, under the what can you document? We have information on how to document music, how to document the impact of a performance, the experiences, how to document working processes, how to document the choreography, how to document the concept of a performance. And under the why do you want to document? do you want to document because of you want to use it in your promotional material, because you want to create an archive, or if you want to add things to your archive? Do you want to document in order to reuse your material, or for education, and so on? And under the how, this is information on how methods, for example, you can use interviews, how can you document audio, video, how can you use the method of motion capture, a method used in dance, how can you annotate, and so on. And then if you make a choice within these 3 boxes, you click on the search button and you can find tools and cases with these 3 combinations. So you can find, for example, a case on documenting music in order to add information to your archive, and the music is on an audio tape, for example. So, but this is the ideal situation, because of course not for all the combinations we already have tools and cases added to this platform. As I said, it was under construction, but this is the idea. And of course, by offering these 3 entries and combinations on that, we also want to encourage the users of this website to explore different methods, things that they didn't thought of before that existed or were possible. Okay, so this is UDoc. Another of our strategic goals is on the valuing of performing arts heritage. It's quite a complex and rather theoretical aspect of our work, but it's important to ask us these questions. How can we make choices for the future based on good choices, I mean, on our archives and collections and intangible heritage, based on good arguments? How can we determine the value or the significance of a performing arts collection or a set of different collections? And with value, we don't mean financial value, but the historical value, artistic significance, social, scientific value, and also the potential to reuse this material. But these are difficult questions, so how will you find answers on that? And in countries as Australia, the Netherlands, the UK, they developed already some methodologies on valuing cultural heritage. So we studied these methodologies, and since it's a good base to make choices for the future on different matters, the government opened up a temporary subsidy channel, as I think it's the right word, for experimental projects on this theme. So we applied for these project means, and the goal of this project is to find a good methodology that examines the significance considering a multiplicity of possible values. And we do this for one puppetry collection, that we investigate the significance. We also do this for jazz records, but jazz records is several collections, so not within one collection, but several collections. And also for historical painted set pieces, also in several collections. So we are now, these projects are still running. And what is very important in these valuing projects is the participation, because you might think that the significance is more like an expert thing to consider, to take into consideration, like academics who do research on this topic. But actually, it's not the case. Of course, academics need to be implied, but you also need to imply others that are closely connected with the collection and that have a certain interest in this collection. And by gathering those people on different moments in this valuing process, and by discussing all these values, you end up having a good idea on the significance this collection or parts in this collection have for different kinds of people that were ever involved in this collection. So it's not only an expert thing to do. And if you can determine the values of a collection or a set of collections, you can create a good base for choices for the future. For example, like heritage institutions, they can also do these valuing projects for their own collection to find solutions on the answers on the questions like which parts of my collection need to be preserved for the future. So how can we select in our own collection? And which parts don't fit anymore in our collection's profile and can be better transferred to another institution or collection. And for arts organizations, it can be a departure point to look for an answer on the question, which part of our archive or collection is of real value for my company? And what does need to be preserved for the future in general, and what is of real heritage value? And maybe I need to transfer this part of my collection to a heritage institution where it can be better taken care of in a heritage context. And for policymakers and for organizations like ours, these kinds of theoretical exercises, for example, now we are making this, doing this valuing exercise for the historical painted set pieces. They are preserved in different locations, in heritage institutions, but also at home with private persons. And we need to think of a way, what is really important to keep for the future. Because if these persons die, for example, and their inheritors want to get rid of these big, unpractical rolls of meters long, they might throw it away. So now we want to have a clear idea on what is really of significance. And then we need to look for solutions in the heritage field to preserve these important aspects of our culture. But of course, these kinds of objects are not easy to handle because it's so big. So maybe we need to advise our government to create more space, to create a storage room especially designed for that. But I'm not naive. It sounds easy. Oh, can you make a storage room for it? Of course, it's not that easy. But at least you have an overview on what could be needed, and if there is a possibility, if all of a sudden we might have a minister of culture that is fond of these objects. Let's hope in the future. Then, of course, we already have an advice ready on what is needed on space and storage. And also for intangible heritage, there are, for the moment, experimental projects going on to look for good methodologies because it's a complete different approach, of course, than for archives and collections. Okay. I'm completely. I'm only half of my presentation, so I need to go a bit faster. Yesterday, we already talked a bit on the sustainable care for archives and collections, because we noticed a need for support and basic information on how to take care of archives and collections. As I said, there is also a need for translation of all these specialized expertise into a language that also non-archivists working in the arts field understand. There's a need for concrete guidelines for everyone working with a performing arts archive or collection. And also specifically for in Belgium, as I also explained yesterday, the companies who want to go for multi-year structural funding by the government, they need to follow a certain certain guidelines to be in order with their archive in order to receive funding. So also for them, there was a list of guidelines necessary. I will come back to that later. And what we also saw that actually we started to develop something specifically for the performing arts field, but as we look to other arts disciplines, actually the heritage processes, if you are active in the contemporary art or architecture or literature or performing arts, actually a lot of these archival processes are similar. It's only a minority that is really specific for performing arts, and that will be important for what we developed. We developed a toolbox project tracks.be, which is available in English for the most part, so that's good news. And it's the toolbox and guidelines for the preservation of archives and collections in the arts. And it has been a collaboration with different partners in the arts and the heritage field, which up until last year, so there must be 2013 to 2018, we received project funding of the government for this. And as I said, if we want to support art organizations in their archiving, it needs to be feasible. The tips we offer need to be feasible and affordable. So that was something we kept in mind as from the beginning. On the toolbox you will find information on all kinds of physical and digital materials. And the target group is not only the performing arts field, but all the arts. As I said, the archival processes are mainly the same. But of course, for performing arts, you can also find information on costumes, on puppets, set pieces. So this is what is specific to the performing arts. And also amateur organizations and professional organizations, regardless size or organizational setup, the information is for everybody, because we want to create diversity in the collective memory of the performing arts in the future, and not only have the big shots in our archives and collections for the next generations. And as I said, the organizations that want to go for structural funding, they need to follow certain guidelines. So we also created a page for them with results and indicators. And what is very important, that it doesn't end with this online toolbox, because at first we thought, okay, we create an online platform and that's it. So people will start archiving, but of course it's not that simple. You need to offer a combination of other supporting services to motivate and to go into particular questions of organizations. So we also offer customized advice, we organize trainings, conferences, and so on. And please use this information, because it is conceived that way, because all the information is in a sort of, I'm not a technical expert, but at the back end of the website, there's a sort of other platform where all the information is integrated. And if you as an if there is a sort of platform organization in Hong Kong that would like to integrate information of this website, it can be taken from that back-end platform and integrated in other websites. So if we adapt something on the back of the website, it changes on the Tracks platform, but also on other websites that take use of this information. And if you want to have other parts available in English, please don't hesitate to translate it so that others also can. So this is the homepage of the website, where you can see the basic preservation guidelines, which are important or interesting for everyone who wants to start archiving, but in particular the organizations who want to receive structural funding. You can find guidelines, tools, projects, and so on. And this is the overview of all these guidelines, which you could see under the basic preservation button. As I said, these guidelines are interesting for everyone who wants to start archiving. And as you see, the pink central, the vision and the policy is really put on the central place of this page, because it all starts with a good vision in your organization. If you want to start archiving, you first need to reflect on why do we want to archive in our organization? To what end do we want to archive? And you can, based on this vision, you can formulate objectives and concrete actions within your organization. So this is for organizations that are structurally funded. This is the only thing that is compulsory, that they have their vision. And further on, you will see other guidelines have an overview of your archive, or determine the value, your classification and your description. And some of them are checkmarked, as you can see. And these are the guidelines specifically for organizations that are structurally funded. Not that they are all compulsory, but the government handles the principle of comply or explain. They need to explain, if they don't follow this guideline, they need to explain why they don't do this. If they have an explanation in their vision that, for example, they don't want to be memoried in the future, because it's one of their core aspects of their work, that it's ephemeral and that they want to be kept for the future, then it's logical that you don't start with your classification and your description and having an overview, because you don't want to be kept for the future, but at least the vision is documented. So things like that. Okay, so this is a page of a guideline, the basic archive preservation, we already said so, and combined with the platform, we also have these other supporting services, as I said, conferences, trainings, and a special tool which I won't go into depth because of the time is the archival assessment we organize. It's a sort of group learning process with five or six companies we go into, and we end up with a report they write for themselves with an evaluation of the current situation and with goals and priorities that they want to handle in their organization. The steps, you take pictures. We also help performing arts organizations in finding storage for their archives and collections in the heritage field. We also, as I said, we had this mass digitization project of audiovisual performing arts material. So we made an inventory of all the audiovisual collections in the different performing arts organizations. And with that inventory, we contacted one of our partners. That is, their core business is archiving. They archived the collections of the media and of different heritage institutions, and now also the collections of the performing arts organizations. So, because it was really urgent and necessary, so we digitized it, and now it's a matter of making the metadata public, as I said, and hopefully we create a sort of platform in the future where we can also publish the material itself, that you can consult it online. But it's of course very difficult regarding copyrights issue. This was the digitization workflow. The safeguarding of intangible heritage. We have this platform, as I said, where you can register your techniques and your skills and practices. We also want to develop tools to support research this upcoming periods. And we also want to support in public presentation, and I hope we can do this a bit further. Just to conclude, actually I forgot a very important conclusion on my slide. The first conclusion I have to make, as you noticed, a lot of platforms are under construction. Of course, there are so many needs where we want to find solutions for that we start developing services and we create, for example, online platforms or manuals. But as you can imagine, it's very time consuming to keep all these platforms up and running, to keep it up to date, to add information, to correct information, to make sure everybody finds its way to your platform. So you need to invest in communication, in meetings where you use and you show this platform. So it's a big challenge for us for the future on how we will deal with all these platforms, because I can imagine this UDOC platform. We think it's very important and it can be relevant for a lot of people, but we just cannot manage it all. So we need to set priorities. But in the end, we hope with this strategy that, of course, the memory of performing arts in our region will be better preserved than before. At least there is more awareness. We notice that there's more awareness. And what is very important on this, that we always combine the tools we develop with supporting services, with customized advice, with conference, with trainings, and so on. It doesn't end only with launching the tools. And of course, the legislative framework has been very important up until now. So we hope, and also what we see is that if we support the performing arts field, in the end, if the company stops for whatever reason, the collections will be better handed over to the heritage field, where they will be kept for the future. So sorry for the quick scan of the last slides. Please, if you have any questions afterwards, contact me. But I'm sorry, Joanna, for.
I have to apologize for having to cut the presentation short. Sorry about that, because I noticed that, sorry, haven't been sleeping enough. I'm sure that applies to every Hong Kong people in the past week. Because personally, I think what Father has shared with us, sorry, is it's kind of new in Hong Kong. Just keep talking. It's kind of new in Hong Kong. I think many of you will share that. So I would assume there will be a lot of questions from the floor. And I noticed there are many theatre practitioners here in the field. So while we have listened to you talking from more like the platform provider or the administrator's perspective, I think it would be very interesting for us to also hear from the practitioners how they feel about, like, I would almost say we are appealing to the practitioners to contribute to this platform so that this heritage initiative can work. Because as you mentioned, you don't maintain a collection on your own. You are basically like a central resources where everybody contributes the content to it. Without that contribution, this central resources, this reservoir doesn't have enough water in it. So I think, I'm very interested in hearing how, or maybe the the privilege of the moderator is to ask the first question. I'm quite interested in your experience in how to bridge the gap, or how to call for the attention or the contribution from the practitioners. I would like to just share a little bit about like our experience in Hong Kong. We do not, well, of course, this is some kind of consolidated platform we are dreaming of, and we have been dreaming about this for years now. It still hasn't happened, so appealing to the funders. But I think we have sporadic efforts over the year. And one of the challenge, I'm sure Bernice feels the same, I personally have experience, is to have standardized input of data is very, very difficult. No matter how you set the, like, we do it in a primitive ways, like we build a template, so fill in the forms, give us the information. It's very difficult. I cannot explain why, but I think there's a mindset that the practitioners will see this archiving effort as it is something that the archivists do, or like Bernice and her team does. Yes, because well, maybe it's sheer respect. You know it better, so you do it. But actually, this makes the archiving very difficult. And also, as the reservoir, I'm only getting information, but without the right input, this reservoir gets a little bit muddy. But it is pretty unfair also for us to expect the practitioners to give us something that, for example, researchers can use, the academics can use, because they are totally different language. And also resources is a very practical concern. You can ask the practitioners how much resources they have for archiving. And just 2 weeks ago, I was rejected a project to do data farming. So I'm not complaining, but I think it's just a reality of public funding and what the funders think is important. So obviously different from what I think. I'm one of those boring people you mentioned that would find this very interesting. So I just want to share a little bit of what we are facing here, and if you have any experience to share about bridging that gap, and then I would like to invite the comments from the floor.
Lots of different aspects on your question. I think what we try to do when we reach out to arts to companies is to convince them of the fact that it helps them so much in their daily practice. If you have a good archive, you can work more efficient, and you can find things far more easy. You can, if someone new starts to work in your company, it's far more easy to introduce them in the way you work, if you have a good archive as well, physical as a digital archive. So that's the first thing we do, to convince them that it helps them in their daily practice if they want to use material for promotion of another production, or if they want to reuse ideas they once had for a former creation that was not realized, and if they want to reuse it for in the preparations of a new creation. If you keep all these aspects in a more efficient, structured way, it just helps you in your daily practice. And what we also do is make it as easy as possible by offering templates, for example. If we say, oh, it's good for a company to have a structure in your archive, we have this kind of Excel sheet on the Tracks toolbox that you just need to download, and with already the columns are already indicated, so you just need to fill out the form. So we make it as easy and accessible as possible. And of course, what I also said is that we first show the potential of all these archives and collections, what you can do on the terms of reuse, to go back to the first steps of archiving. because to be clear, also the companies in Belgium, most of them neither have a lot of means, and they don't get more means because they archive. So it's not because it's in the legal context that they need to archive that they receive more means if they do it. Not at all. But we try to convince because of course at first when we started to implement these steps, of course the first reaction we got was, oh my God, do we also have to do that? We already have to do so much. We want to create. We are artists, you know. We're not archivists. I said, oh, I know, but that's why we are here, to help you and to make it less time-consuming. Because of course, at the beginning, it's time-consuming because if you never had a structure in your archive, you need to think of this structure, you need to do it. But what we also advise is create a structure and start from that point for the future, and not to go back in the past, which would be ideal if you have more time to work retroactive. But at least you start with a structure and work as from that point for the future. And if you have more time, or if you have, for example, interns in your organizations or volunteers, then you can work backwards. That's also an advice we give to make it more feasible. But of course, we are completely aware of that there is no time, no means, no stuff. So that's why we created all these instruments and why we want to help as much as possible. If that is already a bit of an answer to all of
you. Of course it is. So any questions or comments from the audience? If you prefer, you can speak in Cantonese. I can do the translation for you.
No one I asked.
Okay. Okay, our microphone will be through.
Thank you for presenting the big envelope. Yeah, because just like the moderator said, that Hong Kong is a long way to go to achieve what you have been doing in your country. I just asked a question. Are there any legislation or strategy in your country that you promote or you encourage some minor or individual, personal archive other than your organization? What I mean is that although we have this central organization to do this archiving work is very great. I'm sure that you are making very great contribution to the performing arts, in a greater scope. But even we have get a lot of experts to determine what is important, what is significant for the future. But we all know that in a diverse society, diverse community, we cannot really be assured that we cannot determine what is so important in the future. Even someone is so just make his personal collection, personal so-called archive, just to suit his own or her own personal taste. It seems not significant, but we cannot judge what our people their knowledge, their determination to decide what is significant to them. So we cannot predict everything. So if there is a policy to encourage some minor, some individual ones to keep their own smaller heritage archive, I think it's much healthier in a society. So I want to know, are there any policy in your country that encourage such individual or minor personal archiving? I mean, these are the kind of things. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, indeed, in the sense that the Tracks platform is meant for everyone, for amateurs as well as professionals, for big institutions as well as one-person dance company that does everything on his own and has his personal only archive. So yes, that's for us it's the base that everyone, regardless of size or organizational format, is aware of the importance and starts archiving. So we don't make this canonization as from the beginning. You could say we only support the structurally funded organizations, but we don't do that because we want to have diversity in what will be kept for the future. Because it's not up to us to make this decision. But what we do also is that's why this valuing theme to determine the significance is so important to reflect on this theme, because this is a participatory method where you imply lots of people involved in a certain way with a certain collection. And if you have all these people, now we have, let's say, per project that we are doing for the puppets and for the historic set designs and the jazz records, we have for every project now 10 people that are, 10 or 11 people that are member of this group that is involved in a certain way with this collection. And we assemble there, we discuss with them on the different values and the different significance they give to this collection. And then we start discussing, because everyone has a different point of view, or everyone has a different link, or gives a different significance to this collection. And by going into this discussion, in the end, mostly we come to a consensus what is really of heritage value and what we really need to keep for the future. And other aspects of the collection, other parts of the collection, of course, are also interesting, but can, for example, be reused in an educational context. In case of the theater puppet collection, we now have a clear view on what is really of heritage value and needs to be kept in the future within a heritage context, because it was really key figures or key techniques or key materials that are used, or other significances that are important. But other parts of the collection we will offer to schools where they give workshops on the techniques of puppetry theater, that they can reuse it and transmit the knowledge to new students that want to learn from the puppetry techniques. So this valuing aspect is very important in what you said, because we want to avoid that only the big shots, the collections of the known, internationally renowned companies will be kept. Of course, it needs to be kept, but also the projects. Some of the artists consciously don't go for funding because they want to depend from governments in their creational work. I think that might also be the case in Hong Kong. So we need to keep also these traces to avoid that the future of the memory of performing arts is only created by the big shots.
A question along a similar line. So I think it may be a little bit too early to ask this question, so we haven't started the archive yet. But how could you keep the archive from becoming an infinite large, say, archive? I mean, we keep accumulating stuff. So do you have some kind of policy that every 10 years, 20 years, we begin to encarve and throw things away? Or so to just keep the things that's most valuable and to just throw them away, or how do you things like that?
You mean what we advise to a company, for example, what to keep?
In terms of, say, now we're not keeping anything, so we keep something now.
Okay.
So, but for archiving, as time grows, basically things keep accumulating. So you have some policy that every 10 years, 20 years, you go back to your archive and throw things away, so you keep a constant set of stuff.
Yeah, that would be quite easy to have this list, just to give you a list, what should you keep for the future, but unfortunately it's not that easy because we always start to encourage people to create a vision within their company, because every context is different and every company is different, the goals are different, your artistic ideas are different. So it's actually up to the company to decide what is important for us, what do we see now as important for us that we need to keep for the future. And that can be, for some companies, it's very important to keep their audiovisual recordings because they work very audiovisual, or their music is very important because the music is a main aspect of their creational work. So it depends from company to company. And therefore, for example, the UDoc website is a good toolbox in order to start reflecting on that. Does my archive contain what I want it to contain? Or do I need to throw away other things that are less important? Or do I need to create additional material? Because actually, this music is quite important for my creational work. So it's important to reflect yourself on that, because it's not possible to give you a standard list. But of course you could say the costumes, the sets, your administrative archive, your artistic archive, but these are kind of main themes. But within these themes, the objects, it depends on the way you work as a company. That would be my advice.
Actually, I have questions follow on the other audience about the need to archive and the participatory approach your organizations propose. Yes, it's quite fascinating, and I show my appreciation to your organization tends to move the archival institutions into a network model so that we don't need over-rely on a centralized or authoritative institution that's do everything for us. And that is the merit of these models we have listened to today. While we are considering the local context, I do have a little more optimistic feeling, because every institution, no matter how small or big, individual keeps items by themselves in a very piecemeal way. So we did have some grounds for building up archives on the ground or from the bottom. So these fit into the context as participatory models for archives. The questions I would like to ask is from your side, how to keep updating or informed information of these spontaneous or piecemeal informations on the ground, because we may not be very active in informing the institutions whether I have updated something or I have created another piece of the archives which may be used or shared in your platform. How will you keep these information always active and up to date so that we can share or go deep into the network situation, everybody can understand? Yes.
It's a very good question, because it's our daily challenge, actually, what you say. Ideally, if the company starts archiving, one of the guidelines is to have an inventory of this archive, or a description of the archive, And ideally, this information goes into this archival portal I showed you, the portal of private archives, where all kinds of archives are described. So this is the tool we use for these kinds of information. And sometimes we go, when we visit a company to give advice on site, my colleagues fill out a form and we integrate the information ourselves. And there has also been a sort of a workshop to teach how to integrate this information on this portal. But it's a long way to go. But the tools are there, so we just need to use it and to keep on promoting it. So that's the way we need to go. But what we also encounter is at the moment the company, sometimes the company stops because of different reasons, because they don't have any funding anymore, because the key person of the company has deceased, for example. And then we go and look for a solution in the heritage field, because although there is no central museum or theater archive or whatsoever, there are institutions that are willing to get it into their archive, into their collection. So we start making contact, and we are a sort of intermediator at that point to inform the inheritors or other people from the company what are the possibilities in the heritage field. You have this and this institution that could be interested. Whom would you like to contact? Sometimes they want to keep it very close to them, regionally. So that might be an argument for them to choose for a certain institution. Sometimes they have other arguments to choose. So that's the point where we start intermediating and getting into contact and making sure the archive is ready to be handed over. And there, then, of course, the information goes into the database of this archive. And it can be found through their database, which in the end can be found by the website we are creating now with the finding aid that goes to these different databases. So it's a bit of a couple of turns you need to make, but in the end, yeah, the ideas are there, we are developing it, and the tools are there, we just need to do it.
I know they're going to talk about sustainability in terms of archiving. I'm just thinking in terms of, so far these money coming from government funding. So would you advise would you say expect or envision some kind of say commercial model, basically, well, if I archive something, you access my stuff, I will charge you. So that's really basically, no, it's not, I'm not saying, don't make money, just to keep this going on. That gives me something why I'm to keep this stuff. So not in the name of making money.
Yes, that would be good, that we could make money, of course. And now we are indeed thinking of a sort of model, because, as I said, we managed, with different parties, we managed to digitize the audiovisual material of the performing arts, not all, but a big part of it. So the material now is digitized, almost all the carriers are digitized, it's stored, and of course we want to make it public within the limited frame of the copyrights. But how are we going to do it to make it feasible? And again, another platform, so we don't even are able to maintain the current platforms, which are under construction mostly. So we are thinking of these commercial models, but it's not so easy because the donators of the material don't have money themselves. So it's very difficult. And we know in France, for example, there is a platform, a dance platform with all kinds of audiovisual material that is publicly available. And they have this model that the companies need to be a sort of member of this platform, and they upload the material themselves, and the platform, the people behind the platform curate this material by sorting it by theme, for example, dance from that age, from that era, or this type of dance, or dance from a famous choreographer. So they curate the material. That's not the task of the companies. So, but they need to pay in order to make use of this platform. But it's a huge success because it's getting larger and larger. So there are models, but it's something we are not familiar with. So for us, it's a new way to think on matters. So there's always, if you want to go for something new, there's always a resistance. So we need to go through this resistance before we. But it's complex. But there are models that exist.
There's a question I want to ask, but before that, we can take. I think we have time for one more question from the floor. Just wonder if anyone is interested or comments. So my turn. Do you accept individuals like individuals as an audience member to contribute to the archive?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
My question is, what I've heard so far is, yes, everybody can contribute to the archive, but even though they are one-person dance company, he's the maker of the artwork. So my question is, if I were an audience member, can I contribute? Can I use your archive?
You mean like contributing, for example, that you can add your experiences or the impact it has had on you? Yes, if that's one of the on the UDoc website. Yeah, you have the what part. What can you document? And of course, the experience of the public, the impact it has on the public, is also listed in the what. And how can you document this? For example, by interviewing those people. But
by interviewing is also initiated from the maker of the art.
It depends. It's not up to us to decide. So if you are an artist and you find it is your vision that it is important that also the impact it has on the public, that it is important to document, he would think of interviewing his audience. But it all starts what you think is important as an artist or a company that need to be documented for your archive.
So that is not my question. My question is, if I have been to a performance last night and I want to, and I think my experience should be archived.
Okay.
Can I use your platform?
No. we didn't develop something like that because from our point of view up until now, it's always the creator itself that decides what he feels is or she feels is important that needs to be documented. And if you feel that it is important that the world knows what you felt about it, I think there are social media channels, or you can offer it to the company. But up until now, this was not our way to work.
Okay, it's just a thought I put forward from the point of view of a critic or of an audience, because I think performing arts, especially for performing arts, what really is the energy exchange between the performer and the audience. It's not really the set or the costume or the video recording. So
critics are, of course, also a very important part.
And also considering the notion of participatory. Unfortunately, even now, even I always have to say Bernice and I, we haven't found a way to document or to archive the audience perspective or their experience, or to put it this way, we haven't been able to archive the affection or the energy in the theater, which to me is really what the performing arts is. It's not just what is on the stage. And while performing, the performance is itself is ephemeral, as you mentioned, but the memory and the impact on the audience is not. So, well, I have no suggestion to put forward, obviously, because you are the expert. But just as a closing remark, I think this is a dream we can continue to dream. Is to one day we also acknowledge the importance of the audience in archiving of performing arts. So thank you very much today for the very insightful.